What's up creators, Anthony here, and in this video we're going to talk all about color correction and color grading in CapCut. Okay, so here we are, and I already have some clips loaded up on the timeline that all represent some common scenarios that people find with their clips. So our first one is what I call a good example. This is just proper exposure, our white balance looks good, colors look good. This is kind of our base standard. Then we have a mistake that happens a lot, which is overexposing our footage. We'll talk about solving that today. We have underexposing our footage, which is too dark. We have our white balance being set too cold. We have our white balance being set too warm. Then we have some log picture profile clips. Now, if you don't remember what log is, we have an entire video in this course outlining it. It's basically a flat picture profile that helps us retain a little bit more dynamic range, but it also presents a challenge with color correction and color grading because that obviously is very flat and low contrast, but we'll talk about that at the end. Moving back to our first example, I want to just run you through the basic color correction tools in CapCut. I actually already have them open, but let's say you are at the typical video panel. You'd come all the way to the right here and select the adjustment panel. Now we have 4 sub-tabs. The one that you will use the most is basic. Now scrolling down in this panel, you'll see that we have a selection for a LUT. Now a LUT is a color grading preset that you can use on your footage. We'll talk about that a little later. Moving forward, we have the general adjustment tab. This has things like our color temperature to make a clip colder or warmer. We have our hue, which on the left will add like a green tone, and on the right we'll shift it to purple or magenta. And then we also have our saturation, which will boost the saturation of the colors or give it a black and white look if we totally remove it. Then we have some tools that I'm using all the time, which is our brightness, very self-explanatory. We have our contrast, and if you're not aware of what contrast is, that's basically the intensity difference between the brighter areas of your scene and the darker areas of the scene. So when you increase your contrast, areas like my face here that are already pretty bright are going to continue to get brighter, and areas over here that are kind of darker, like the shadows back here, they will only get darker. So we're stretching the contrast when we increase it. See how intense that's getting? And then when we decrease the contrast, we're essentially doing the opposite. So the brighter areas are going to get fainter and the darker areas are kind of going to get brighter. Then we have our highlights, which is pretty self-explanatory. This is going to try and only impact just the brighter areas. So if we increase our highlights, the bright areas are going to get brighter. And if we decrease the highlights, the bright areas are going to get darker. Notice how this has 0 impact on the shadows. That's what comes next. Our shadows will increase the brightness of the shadows and leave the highlights like my face and my shirt relatively untouched. And if we bring the shadows down, pretty self-explanatory at this point. Now your white and your black point is really similar to your highlights and your shadows. For the time being, you can basically treat them the same. And then finally, we have illumination here, which is kind of like CapCut's little AI brilliance filter. When you increase it, it's just going to try to brighten the clip in a way that also looks good. We're not destroying the quality, but we're brightening it according to how CapCut sees fit. Then we have some things like sharpening our clip. I usually do not want to touch this. I like to have my clips at the minimum level of sharpen. We have clarity, which is going to mess with kind of the contrast in a few other areas to give it what CapCut believes to be a more clear look. Particles is going to add like weird grain. I don't know why anybody would ever use that. We have fade, which basically reduces the contrast and gives the clip like a faded look. And then we have something I actually use a lot, which is vignette. Many times I will find myself using this to kind of focus the scene on the subject in the middle because it just kind of darkens the edges. You can see it at the extreme, it looks very bad, but somewhere around here, it looks pretty focused. And then you can also add a white vignette, which I pretty much never do. You may also notice here that we have an apply to all button, which will basically take the color correction that you've done to this individual clip and extend it to all of the other clips in the timeline. And then we also have a save as preset. This is kind of like creating your own custom LUT that when we do that, let's change this up and increase the saturation a ton just so it's very evident. When we save this as a preset, it's going to give you a little notice that it won't translate to mobile device, but that's fine. If you're wondering where that went, you would come up to the top left of your screen where it says adjustment, then you would go to presets, and you will see this newest one. You can see it's adjustment preset 3. Every time you save a preset, it's going to basically make it the highest number. But regardless, that is essentially how you create your own little custom LUT. Now, I'm going to take that off by hitting Command Z and then Command Z again. Now, I've removed all the color correction, and that's basically how the initial tools will work. You can see that with a clip like this, with our overexposed clip. Now that you know how all those tools work, it's pretty simple to fix this stuff. We'll come over to the adjustment tab, we're in the basic sub tab, and let's look at what happens when I just bring down the brightness. So it's definitely helping. Now a clip that's this overexposed is probably beyond saving, but this definitely looks a lot better than where it was before. I'm just checking this box on and off to show the before and after. I still think the highlights are just beyond overexposed. You can see there's no detail in these areas. They're just completely lost. If we wanted to, we could also try to bring down the highlights a little bit. Maybe bring down the contrast. That doesn't really help too much. Bring down the whites. Not bad. Like, if your life depended on saving a video, sure, I think we could get away with this. Definitely comparing it before and after, it's a lot better. Something that's just a little bit overexposed is definitely savable, but something like that is pretty dang bad. But either way, that's how the tools will work in that example. As you can imagine, the underexposed clip is the exact opposite. We're going to select it, come down. Here we're going to increase the brightness. Get Google Drive out of my view. Keep increasing it. Go to a point that has a frame that actually looks pretty good. There we go. And then we'll increase the shadows as well. Increase the highlights. Increase the brightness a little bit more. Let's see how the illumination plays. That actually looks really good. And now this brings up a really important concept that I think all content creators should learn. And it is the fact that it's much easier to save a clip that's been underexposed than it is to save a clip that's been overexposed. If we compare this video to this one, my whole face is pretty much blown out. Like, it's still kind of gone. The detail in this shot just does not look good. It's hard to save a highly overexposed clip, but on the flip side, we still can save underexposed. So if you're ever out in the field shooting something and you're wondering, you know, should I underexpose slightly or overexpose slightly? Usually it's best to underexpose. Now, blazing through this section, we have our clip where the white balance was set to cold. As you can probably imagine, we're going to come up to the temperature setting here and increase the temperature. You can see we're canceling a lot of that out. And if we compare it to our original clip over here on the left, it's not that bad. I think we have a little bit of green in the face. Like, comparing those, I think I just look a little sickly here. And now remember, temperature is warmth and coolness, right? We have blue and basically orange, warmth on this side. Hue, on the other hand, is green and magenta. And so if you notice your image is looking a little green, the way that you fix that is by adding magenta back in, and it will kind of cancel that out. So if we turn this on and off and just kind of see our before and our after, I think that looks a lot better. You could also decrease the saturation a little bit, which sometimes can help if your colors are just off. It's like, all right, well, let's desaturate them a little bit and it won't be as noticeable. But you can get an idea of, you know, a simple trick to saving an improperly white balanced clip. Our next one here is too warm, so we're going to do the opposite. We'll bring the temperature down. And already that looks way better. This is the before, this is the after. You know, similar to the last one where we had a little bit too much green. This one now I think we have some purple showing up in the shirt, so we could make that a little bit more green. We're dragging the hue here. And a lot of this, like, I understand you want to be told like exactly how to color correct. There is no exact science. A lot of it is using your eye to kind of spot things in the video that you feel don't look right. Oh, there's too much green. Okay, add magenta. Or the flip side, it's too warm. Well, let's bring the temperature down. It's too dark. Let's bring the brightness up. That is literally 85% of color correction. And these basic tools are really all we need to use to get 95% of the job done. But with that being said, we can crank things up a notch and move on to a log clip. So you can see this video was shot on my Sony a7S III in S-Log3, which is a very flat, low contrast picture profile. I do want to show you how easy and powerful LUTs are before we color grade this manually. All you need to do here is come up to the adjustment tab. We've got basic selected, and then we have our LUT section here. All I need to do is come to this drop down and then choose my S-Log3 LUT. Now look at the difference between no LUT and using a LUT. Like, that looks incredible. Now, where do you find good LUTs online? There are a lot of sites that sell them. You can find them for free here and there on the internet. We obviously have a huge library of professionally designed LUTs at contentcreatortemplates.com, which as a student, you get a big discount on. That's a great place to start. I'll actually give you one LUT for free. It'll be linked in the description below. But needless to say, that's where you can download some LUTs. And if you're wondering, how do I install a LUT? Well, LUTs work in all editing platforms, and on CapCut, all you need to do is come up to this adjustment panel on the top left-hand side of your screen, come down to the LUT subtab, and then hit this import button. You can see I have my S-Log3 LUT that I've already imported. You would just click import, and wherever your LUT is downloaded on your computer, you can select it, and now you will be able to choose it in CapCut. But let's say we don't have LUTs and we don't want to use them. We can turn this off for now, and I'm going to show you a trick to color grading log that actually makes it pretty easy. So with this clip selected, we are actually going to come up to this little button right here and turn on our color oscilloscope. It's a big word, and it's going to give you these complex looking windows at the bottom of your player. Now, what these represent is color and light data. Top to bottom is our brightness. So you can see as I move my clip here, the data is moving with the image on screen. And I guess an easy way I could show this is look at the dark shorts that I'm wearing and look at the line over here on the bottom right of the frame. That is the darkest part of our image, and that is also the lowest line on this graph. And the way that you can compare and contrast these two, this has red, green, and blue data all meshed together, whereas this is essentially the same graph, but you can see the different scopes for the red, the green, and the blue. Personally, I spend most of my time looking at this graph. Now, you don't really need to know any of this to actually use my little trick for color grading log, but I do want you to be aware still of how it works. And now, remember, this is our darker shorts right here. As we move the clip, you can see that is literally moving on the graph in the same way that my shorts are moving left to right. And that's where this data is. And now look at the gimbal. The gimbal, this is the DJI OM6, it's a brighter element in the screen. And as I remove it from my pocket, you can actually see a little chunk of data here in the center of the screen moving in the same kind of fashion as the gimbal. It starts out in the center of the frame, and then as it gets pulled, that data, like right there is an easy way to look at it. The frame is not really changing at all, except for the gimbal, and you can see that little clump of data moving with the gimbal. And it's pretty high up in the frame because it's a brighter element of the frame, right? Up here is brighter areas, and down here is darker. Okay, science of these graphs aside, all you need to know is that you basically want to stretch the graph so the bottom is right at the bottom and the top is right at the top. You don't want any elements to go above this line right here because we're losing that data, and you don't want any elements to go beneath this line. Now, an easy way to do this is to come over to your curves editor right here, select that subtab, and so now this is our brightness curve. The bottom left is representing the shadows, the blacks, and then the top right is representing the highlights. Watch what happens on the graph here when I grab this dot and bring it to the right. See how I'm bringing the data to the bottom of the graph. And I ideally don't want to let any little part go under that line, under the zero. If I do, look at the shorts. The detail in the shorts are completely lost, right? You can't see that there's a pocket there or a fold or a shadow. Whereas when I bring that back up, Okay, now we're above the line again, and you can see all that detail. When you hear content creators talk about crushing the blacks or having our highlights clipped at the high end, that is essentially the terminology for data being lost because it's going beyond the expanse of this graph. So all we've done here is drag this left dot to the right until we're just about at that line. Now with this top one, we're going to select the highlights and drag it up to right around here. All we've done is added a boatload more contrast to the image. Now I will typically look at a graph like this and say, well, you know, it looks like most of the data is up here and we're still lacking a lot down here. So all I'm going to do is make another dot towards the bottom section of this graph and also drag it down. And look at that. See how I'm dragging that middle data down over here. The highlights are still locked in because we have a dot there, but we've dragged this down pretty significantly. And I think that looks pretty good right there. And that's really all we need to do with the graphs. From here, we can come back to basic, and now we need to add our color back in. It's basically a mixture of contrast and color that's lost in log video. And so we add back in contrast, which we just did. And now we have to add back some saturation. Increase that saturation to the point where it looks natural to your eye. And boom, before, after. And now we're pretty much done. And just in case you want a synopsis of those steps, we'll put a little graphic on screen. It's basically open up your color oscilloscope, then you go over to the curves, and you adjust the shadows to the right and the highlight dot to the left to add contrast back in. Then you'll go back to the basic tab and increase your saturation. And now you're going to be a pro at editing log. And just to show you how simple this process is over and over again, we'll go to another clip here. This is a talking head video, like something for a YouTube video. With this clip selected, we have our graph here that has now been updated. This is called a scope. And all we need to do, same as before, come up to our curves, grab the shadows, bring it down until it's touching the bottom, grab our highlights, bring it up. I'm not going to bring it all the way up because that's just too bright, but that looks a lot better. And now we will come to our basic, increase our saturation. I'll usually increase the contrast a little bit more as well. And that just looks super good already. Playing through that, I would post that on YouTube and it took me 2 seconds to color grade it. And we'll do it one more time just so you can see it. This is a new clip. This was shot on the iPhone 15 in Apple Log. And we'll come to our curves, make sure we're up at the brightness one, drag the shadows down, drag the highlights up, go to basic, increase saturation, increase contrast, and boom. That is a very nice looking clip that I would be happy to post online. And I told you I was going to give you a LUT for free. The LUT that I'm going to give you is my Apple Log LUT. I made it specifically for the iPhone 15 Pro Max. You could use it on a lot of different log picture profiles for cameras, but I'll have that in the description below. Other than that, thanks for watching. I hope this wasn't too overwhelming. I know we talked a lot about the different tools. A lot of your actual skill will come from only doing this yourself. So right now you can actually go down to the description, download all of the clips that have been used in this video, and you can follow along again. Doing that over and over and over again will build that muscle memory in your brain, and you will be a pro colorist in no time. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.